Welcome to Fans Without Borders. My name is Ray.
And I'm Brent.
How's it going, Brent? How's the week been for you?
Week has been good. Good stuff happening work-wise. Family's doing good. My dad had a back surgery, actually, that went successful, so that is good. I really can't complain pretty much everywhere. Things are going well.
You know, that's good. Good to hear. The week ended well for me. I'll put it that way. It ended well
Good,
for me.
good.
So like, you've mentioned before about how you know football, but you're really just a Chiefs fan.
Right.
Okay. So, do you remember what the Chiefs offense looked like before Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah.
And do you remember what the Chiefs offense looked like before Andy Reid?
Yeah.
Okay.
It looked a lot less successful, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got you.
Okay, so basically, yesterday the Big Ten came back in football, like finally, like everybody else, pretty much. I think except maybe the Pac-12, but like for weeks, college football has been played. No Big Ten. It's like, let's get it going. And so they all came back, and so Michigan played Minnesota, and for years, our offense looked like the pre-Andy Reid days, like even as early as like the last couple of years, right? And it's just
Okay.
Okay, it's boring, and run the ball and just off guard, off tackle, and power football, run with the I formation, and all this other just
Power football.
Well, it's just and offensively, it's like your quarterbacks don't throw for a lot of numbers, and running backs don't do a lot, and there's wide receivers barely catch anything, and it's just boring, and it wasn't working. And for years, I was like, change. Everybody's doing spread offense. Change. Be modern. Update. They finally did it last night, and it looked so good. It looked so good. I'm very excited.
Good.
Very excited. So yeah, the week ended really well for me because that game.
I saw you
was at
tweeting about it.
7:30.
You seemed quite pleased.
Yeah, you know what? I think I lost like 6 followers because I was probably because either they're Minnesota fans or I was tweeting too much about football. But it is what it is. It's fine. Because I tweet about sports now, and some other mutuals have like joined in on sports conversations with me, and it's fun. But it is what it is. It's cool. Go blue. Yeah, it was.
There you go.
We started the season 1-0. It's fantastic. It was fun. So yeah, it was a solid end to the week for me. A solid end to what was otherwise a relatively stressful week. But it's all good. It's all good. I was gonna rant today, but no, rant over. That game and everything, the way Saturday went, completely. Like I'm good. I'm good to go. Let's roll.
Good. I'm glad you got it out of your system.
All right. So with that in mind, we will bring up that we are a part of the Squadcast Media Network, which has DC Film Squadcast hosted by Tim and Scott, DC Comics Squadcast with Jordan and Chris, Horror Comics Podcast hosted by Chris. Marvel Squadcast did make a return recently.
Yep, it'll be a little bit before the next episode of that. We'll let some more Marvel news kind of build up there, with the lead up until WandaVision. So
Yeah.
There's been a couple things. I mean, not that we could get a full episode out of, but a couple Marvel things have happened recently.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And DC TV Squadcast, as I mentioned before, is still there. It is still in a bit of limbo. Funny enough, I was talking to Scott the other night, and he reminded me that I had to reinstall Skype. I'm at that point with my computer where, like, I will forget that something isn't reinstalled, and then I'll go to use it, and it's not there, and it's like, oh, I need to reinstall this. It's like, oh, okay, like, all right.
Yeah. You need to make a list. Like, I do this for my work laptop, a list of everything I currently need, so I can remember to go back through it afterwards.
Yeah, totally. No, he was telling me that he watched The Witches the other night on HBO Max, which I haven't seen yet. And so we were rapping about that for a second, and then it occurred to me, oh wait, I don't have Skype installed. So still in the process of getting my computer reacclimated to things. Everything's on cloud now, though. Everything is on cloud now.
I'm glad to hear that.
I'm a cloud person now, as far as
this is the way.
This is the yeah, it's very, very nice. I like that. We are. That's this week.
It's soon. It's like the 30th. It's soon.
That is this week, and there's a rumor that it's like 52 minutes.
I saw that rumor. I didn't know the sourcing. I will put no stock into it until I'm watching minute 1 of that episode and I take a glance at the runtime. But either way, I enjoyed season 1. I'm excited for it.
Yes, awesome for sure. But anyway, so yeah, DC TV will come back at some point in the not too distant future. Just still getting ducks in a row with everything else and whatnot. So that's where that's at.
And then, of course, we do want to take a minute to thank you, all of you guys, for supporting us over on Patreon. We really appreciate it. Squadcast movies, Sin City's out now. That came out last week, I think. Batman Returns is going to be soon, and I got to think we'll be getting close to scheduling that 1977 Spider-Man conversation because, I mean, at this point, we're past the hangups that I had, the busy weeks that I had to get through. So I'm pretty much ready to record that, and we'll see how that goes. Really, I mean, it's such a thrilling and exciting movie that I'm sure there's going to be a lot to say. So we need to get on scheduling that one.
Yeah, I think Tim is probably he was probably waiting for you to get clear of your schedule so that there would be no excuses. so that. For certain, it's like, oh no, we're here. We're getting it's the Spider-Man crew, because we do have a Spider-Man crew.
We do.
So yeah, that'll be happening probably in the not too distant future. That'll be interesting for sure when we get to it.
Well, speaking of getting to it, we have a lot to talk about this week. So let me start off with mentioning that our friends over at the Geekverse podcast are doing a charity live stream on November 7th. It is a fundraiser for the BC Children's Hospital in Canada. They've got a goal of $1,500 they're trying to get to, and they're basically doing a 24-hour stream with all kinds of games and everything throughout the day. I will tell you that they are doing a trivia contest, and relevant to listeners of this network, you might like to hear that Scott is going to be hosting their DC section of their trivia contest, and I was asked to participate and host the Marvel one. So I have been coming up with questions. Ray, I may ask you if you have any good ideas off the show for any good questions, some stumpers and stuff. I've got some that I'm quite happy with, but I've got a couple in there that I'm like, I still need to go through and fine tune these a bit. But I am looking forward to doing that. It should be a lot of fun. It's basically going to be the Geekverse podcast people versus the Super Civil Servants crew, which of course works with them on the Geek Ultimate Alliance network. And so they wanted some people who were not officially members of either of those to moderate in the middle. And I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun. And of course it is for a good cause. I'm going to have a link to their page on it in the show notes. So if you're able to donate at all, I would greatly appreciate it if you'd even take just a couple minutes to read through that link and see what it's going for.
It's always cool to do stuff like this for charity and for good causes. Are you keeping your questions like centered around MCU based?
Marvel, and this goes for DC too. It's the only rule is live action movie. So there's no Netflix, there's no Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
No comics. Okay.
But is there something from the Blade movie? Yeah, there might be something from the Blade movies. Is Ghost Rider available? Ghost Rider is technically available. Is there anything in it? I'm not willing to say, but it's definitely on the table.
So not strictly MCU. It could be any of the movies.
Any live-action Marvel movie. And
all right.
I'm going to say, I found out from this. It's not in there because there's no way to definitively see this and reprove it. Kevin Feige filmed a cameo in Marvel's X-Men, the very first one. But it's a scene that got cut. He was a lab tech in the Weapon X facility where Wolverine breaks out of in the flashbacks. And I thought that was hilarious.
Wow.
But there's no way he was fully decked out. You couldn't tell it was him. And the footage completely got cut. So it's just something that he had said lost the time basically. But I was interested by that. If I could have found the footage, oh, that was going in. But I couldn't find it, so it's not.
I was gonna say because I'm like there was no Weapon X flashbacks in the first movie.
Well, just like glimpses of his past and stuff, and
Yeah.
It's not there. The scene got cut. Didn't even make the deleted footage. So it's not there.
Well, yeah, that's a shame. But no, and that's this is on air, but that might not be a bad trivia question. Is like how many non-MCU movies is his name on? There's quite a few.
I would have to look it up.
There's quite a few. People don't. I feel like people don't realize it. I feel like people don't know that he had his hand in a lot of those movies before the MCU started.
He cut his teeth. He learned some lessons starting with X-Men. Like, for good or for bad, he had a hand in several of those movies, and I like to think that it helped turn him into the producer that gave us Iron Man and so on. And so, no, that I'm not going to do it because I know a lot of those guys would be listening to this, so don't even bother looking it up because I'm not going to do it now just because you said it. But that would be an interesting stat. I may need to find out just to satisfy my own curiosity.
Yeah, but no, that's cool. So you're doing the Marvel part. Scott's doing
DC. Yep.
The DC part. I'm glad in his case it's restricted to movies because otherwise no one would get a question right.
Travis Hines is not happy. It's restricted to movies. He wanted some DCCW questions in there. And he is not happy at all. But you got to put some kind of limit at some point. So
yeah. I don't think Scott would have many Legends of Tomorrow questions.
I don't know. His favorite show. He might have a few.
That's a valid point. He listens to our show. He's going to enjoy that.
Okay. That aside, we really did get a lot of news this week. There's a lot of things to touch on. And I think we got to start with Zack Snyder's Justice League, which is the title. Zack Snyder's Justice League. It came out this week. That is the title. We know that Snyder was pushing for that, and he got what he wanted. Ray, are you happy with that title versus just calling it Justice League the Snyder Cut?
I am happy with that because, one, it's the title that he wants. And, the big thing about all of this that I feel like a lot of people tend to forget is that, this whole movement, all of it from the beginning, the core of it has been creative freedom. The director getting to tell the story the way that he wants to tell the story, that is part of it. The title is part of it. And there's a distinction. We're still seeing people, crazy enough, even with the news that we're about to get into today, which I think even further definitively proves that this isn't just reshoots and that this isn't just an alternate version of the film, is that, there's still people out there that are trying to determine, whether or not this is a completely new thing, or whether it's just an extended version of the movie we got 3 years ago. And this is another distinction pushing it out of that category. Like, if you just called it Justice League the Snyder Cut, then that means that there's a name for people to go, oh, well, this is just a director's cut of the movie 3 years ago. Calling it Zack Snyder's Justice League definitively denotes it as, no, this is his version. This is not the same film that you saw 3 years ago. This is Zack Snyder's version of the film, which, for those, yes, absolutely. We love that title from the beginning. We love the logo and all the branding for it. Yes, very glad that it's official now.
I guarantee you will hear me still refer to it as the Snyder Cut. One, it's just easier to say, and two, after several years of training of how to refer to that, it's still going to come out. But just know that I do recognize it is Zack Snyder's Justice League. You mentioned, is this just a redo of a movie we've already seen, or is it a completely new thing? I think the truth is in the middle. I think the truth is very much in the middle there. And I saw this question going around. It's like, how is this stuff that we're about to talk about qualify as reshoots? I'm like, well, it doesn't. It's additional photography, which I think is what we said it was the whole time when we found out they were going back and doing it. It's additional photography. It's incredibly common. All these big budget movies do it. In fact, sometimes they schedule it because they know during principal, they just don't have time for specific things. Or maybe there's an actor they want to come in and do something, and there's no time for them to do it during the principal, but they could do it during their scheduled reshoot. So it's never a reshoot to begin with because they never shot it. It's additional photography. And with that, the news where we found out about Zack Snyder's Justice League official title, Jared Leto as the Joker is coming back and filming new scenes. So maybe we will get to see him alongside the Batfleck version. I would like to point people to Fans episode 156. During the listener questions section of that episode, we were asked if we think the Ayer cut will happen. And we both agree that it makes, from a purely business standpoint, it makes tons of sense to do. And I think this is just further evidence, not just that it makes sense to do it, but I think this is evidence that it's likely to happen. Like if I were betting on it, I would definitely bet that this is more likely to happen than not. In that episode, I said Leto's Joker was my favorite part of the Suicide Squad. My favorite part of a movie I didn't like. Call it what it is. But I liked him. I was curious to see more of him. I was intrigued at the thought of more of him with that take on Batman. And now we're going to get it. This news, as I told you guys in the chat, it pleases me. I'm good with this. I like it. What were your thoughts when we found out about Leto?
Well, I'm excited. I agree with you. Quite honestly, it almost makes not doing the Ayer cut silly. Mm-hmm. Because this isn't even a character that Zack Snyder had in his films. It'd be one thing if he was the one that cast Jared Leto as the Joker. He wasn't. David Ayer did. And now he is taking a David Ayer character, a version of the Joker, and putting it in his version of Justice League.
Giving us that shared universe cohesiveness that I appreciate a lot.
Absolutely, and I feel like a lot of people will certainly appreciate that. There's been tons of speculation. I saw a Screen Rant article that basically said that this is opening the door for, not just for Zack Snyder's Justice League to happen, but also for that version of the DCEU to now exist in some form going forward. And the Ayer cut would be part of that as well. There was, I don't know if you remember, but when Suicide Squad premiered 4 years ago, and they had that big red carpet premiere, like Affleck, mm-hmm. Affleck was, and the other Justice League cast members were there. There was a cast shot, and like off in the distance, you saw Jared Leto and Ben Affleck talking to each other about something. And I will always remember that shot because I remember when I saw that, I was like, "Ooh, they're plotting. They're plotting something between the Bat and the Joker." And now to know that we might get that the possibility of seeing Batfleck interact with Jared Leto's Joker is like, very excited for that. Mm-hmm. Very excited mm-hmm. for that because I loved his take on the Joker, mob boss Joker. I've said many times before I want to see more of that, which is another reason I want to see the Ayer cut. And the idea We've gone over the idea of the Joker being this role for, it's been called like Hamlet, where like actors do their own different take from it. We've seen so many different takes. I, to this day, have not seen a bad take of it. I have always wanted to see more of Leto's take because I felt the 10 minutes we got in Suicide Squad wasn't enough. If we're getting him in the Ayer cut and Zack Snyder's Justice League, I mean, that's fantastic. Yes, absolutely. This is excellent news, and the hype for this was so big on Twitter when this came out, and there's been speculation over whether or not this was something that wanted to get out at the time. I don't know how you keep something like this a secret for too long, but like I will tell you that I saw somebody on Twitter post definitively when this news came out. They called that date May 20th Part 2. That's how big, and I don't know that I would necessarily, hype-wise, people were treating it that big. Like, this is a big deal. This is a huge deal for him to be in this, in whatever capacity, because of course there's now speculation over what part of the movie he's going to be in.
Sure.
Is it a setup for the Injustice League? Is he going to be in the Nightmare sequence?
And I've seen people saying, where does he fit in the Justice League story? But it's like, again, you got to remember, we're getting 4 hours of a show here. He said it's 4 1-hour episodes. There's time. There's time for a B plot. There's time for a C plot if you want. My expectation, my best guess would be it's either setting something up for the future or it's just a side story with Batman. Maybe it's just a few minutes at the beginning catching us up on what Batman's doing. Either way, I'm interested in seeing it. I'm interested in seeing Ben Affleck's Batman with Jared Leto's Joker. No, he's not my favorite live-action Joker based on what I've seen of him so far, but I liked him. I was intrigued by his take. It was very different from what we had just got with Heath Ledger, which is kind of what I wanted at the time, and it's different than what we've gotten since with Joaquin Phoenix. It's DC playing up on their multiverse angle, and I think that's overall, I call that a win.
Could not agree more, and again, it further cements how different this version of the film is going to be, because he wasn't in the movie we saw 3 years ago.
Now, there was another rumor that came out with not quite a solid sourcing on it, let's say. In fact, I gave you the option if you even wanted to bring it up, and you said you did. So why don't you tell us about this Deathstroke news? Or not news.
Well, it's just speculation that Joe Manganiello is also going to be part of the additional photography as Deathstroke. Now, here's the thing. Logically speaking, it makes sense, because we know additional photography has started. Part of the Leto story was also finding out that other players like I think Ray Fisher and like Ben Affleck have been doing additional photography for it now.
Right.
So knowing that Deathstroke was in that post-credit sequence, and also knowing that there were bigger plans for him in that film, and the speculation, I don't know if it was confirmed or speculation that he was going to be the main villain in the Batman solo that Ben Affleck was going to direct. Don't know about that. But, it makes sense, right? And the reason that the source of this is that he was on a Twitch video recently and his hair's dyed blonde. Now, of course, Deathstroke is not blonde. However, as people have pointed out, to get to gray, you have to start with blonde.
Right.
Because he's normally got darker hair. So, yes, it totally makes sense. Logically speaking, if you put two and two together, it makes sense that he would be a part of it. He's never shied away from the Deathstroke role. He's actively been, he's talked about it on social before, that he was in favor of the plans moving forward for it. It makes sense. It's just we don't have anything official. Warner Brothers has said nothing official on it. The sourcing of this was literally just the Twitch video, his hair being dyed in a Twitch video.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea if he comes back. I do think he is going to come back. I thought that before we saw this news, and news isn't even right. I saw that before we saw this speculation, this rumor, whatever you want to call it. It's not news yet. This didn't come from Variety. This didn't come from Hollywood Reporter, one of the ones that we pretty much take to the bank as assumed happening, which is going to be relevant here in a little bit later in this episode. There's so much sense there. They did all this work, and if that would lead me towards thinking maybe he's going to be involved with the Joker, with the Jared Leto stuff. Maybe we'll see Eisenberg's Lex again. Obviously not my favorite character, but if it would, from a story standpoint, it would make sense. You could see almost, just imagine a scene of the three of them talking and planning and scheming, and it would be interesting. And no, Eisenberg's Lex and BVS wasn't a Lex that I liked. But by the end of the movie, he was moving in that direction. He was headed that direction, so maybe he'll get to a point where I can appreciate it. I'm much more interested in hearing either of these other people other than Eisenberg's Lex, but from a story standpoint, to me, it does make sense of his involvement there. Just imagine him and Leto, even just the two of them talking. It would be cool to see.
Do you understand what we're talking about here, the possibilities with this? We already know that this movie, or that this show/movie, because there will be a movie version of it, we already know that we're getting Darkseid, OG Steppenwolf, Desaad. We know that Parademons, we know that's there. And now we're talking Jared Leto's Joker and strong possibilities of Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke and Jesse Eisenberg's. That seriously, the potential for this, in addition to the League itself, right? Black Suit Superman and more Cyborg and the different Flash, and all of the, the possibilities for how epic this flippin' thing is going to be is staggering, seriously. From a character standpoint. For DC hasn't done anything on a live action scale quite this large, right?
No.
at this point, the largest ensemble that we have at all for any of these comic book films is Endgame for the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
This, we're not talking about number of, not roster numbers, but in terms of scope and scale of characters, this is going to be the largest live action DC thing we've ever seen. So, my goodness.
I'm still waiting for some confirmation on some green people to show up, but we'll hold out hope for that. We'll see.
You know what?
There's hope, and that's enough for me. Hope is blue though, but
the chatter is the
chatter is still there. It's still there. It's enough for me.
Chatter is definitely still there. So I think it. Listen, Brent, you talk to certain people, and they tell you. They're basically telling you should already have bought your Zack Snyder's Justice League shirt to wear on our show because you are going to be satisfied when that day. It's not a question of if, Brent, but a question of when.
Well, we'll see.
Sure.
I am still on Umbrella Stay Watch, but
can we get that confirmed though? When it happens,
I need confirmation. I need
I
need it from Variety. I need it from THR. That's Deadline. I need it from one of those.
One of the trades, and then we will get you your Zack Snyder Justice League shirt, and you will wear it for all to see. Yeah, and for those that are listening,
we'll see.
Go to the YouTube video. We'll post pictures. It'll happen. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. We're gonna make it happen. We're willing it into existence.
We'll see.
We'll
see. Okay. Well, let's talk about something that maybe doesn't quite have you as excited as that news. We got some information on Warner Brothers and HBO Max and a little bit of restructuring there. It feels like every few weeks we hear about some restructuring with these companies. Toby Emmerich is now going to be basically, I didn't even see what his title was, but he's overseeing all the movies. Theatrical, streaming, whatever. He's seeing the movies. At this point, did Warner Max even get to put out a single movie that he wasn't involved in? I don't know the answer to that. But Ray, what was your reaction to hearing this?
All right, so I went through a couple of emotions on this. When I first saw it, I was not happy. I was not happy at all. Because, and here's the thing. Toby Emmerich is a name that among our mutuals, among our audience, evokes a particular emotion. And that emotion is connected to all of the mess involved with Zack Snyder's Justice League. Because he was part of the Warner Brothers machine that allowed the situation of 3 years ago to happen. So when in many ways, people put him in the same category as Jeff Johns and John Berg and Joss Whedon because he allowed all of it to happen on his watch, right? But this is even before Walter Hamada came into the picture. And for me, my concern... there were people that concerned, oh no, now he's going to mess with Zack Snyder's Justice League. No, he's not. He can't. They've already invested far too much into it. There's nothing he can do to affect that, nor would he, because Warner Media wants that project to happen. My concern was the old Hollywood. He's a part of old Hollywood. I don't want any old Hollywood in streaming at all. I don't want any of that mindset. I don't want any of those old practices. I want none of that to touch streaming whatsoever. So that was why I had such a visceral reaction to this at first. But I do want to point out, and I actually want to thank John Aaron Garza from Real Anarchy and also Stephen Colbert from Screen Rant, because the both of them really put things in perspective for me after my initial reaction of anger on Twitter to this. Basically, both of them in different ways indicating that this is just a result of more of the shuffling that is happening, in terms of the streamlining of Warner Brothers into the Warner Media fold. We've seen a ton of layoffs at Warner Brothers in the last couple of months. A lot of executives have been going by the wayside. This isn't a promotion. This is Emmerich basically being put in charge of things that all of his buddies were fired from. Right. And it's right. And so it's lateral of anything. And not only that, Garza was saying that it's more along the case of he's saying, okay, I'm accepting the regime of Jason Kilar and Ann Sarnoff, I will play ball. Colbert was saying it's more along the lines of we're putting you in charge of all of this for the time being. You're just going to do it our way. And, that this is basically my concerns about Emmerich imprinting the old Hollywood ways into the streaming may be non-existent. Because he's not in charge of Warner Media. He's in charge of theatrical production, or feature-length production, I should say. Mm-hmm. Whether it's streaming or theatrical. But it's not anything where it's like, oh, he has more power and he can do that. It's not that. It's just, it's almost kind of a by default move because so many other executives have been let go. And for all we know, he could still be part of the changeover going forward. It's literally just moving cogs. It's just cogs continuing to move in the wheel with Warner Media streamlining the process and pushing Warner Brothers further into their grand plan going down the road.
Sure. It's kind of like if a company is going through layoffs and there's a team of 3 and one person gets laid off and the other 2 are still there. Well, they now have to do their work plus the work of the person who got laid off.
Yes.
To me, it's sort of like that.
Yes, that's pretty much how Colbert put it, yes.
It's not necessarily the name I want to see in charge, but even if it's just temporary, like I really wouldn't be surprised if we found out in 6 months or whatever that they were splitting stuff up again, splitting duties up again. We did get a little bit of other information from HBO Max specific, a subscribers update. AT&T said that they added 8.6 million activations to HBO Max, so that's people who signed up or that's people who get it for free as part of their other plans, and they just activated it because you still have to activate that subscription. So they've gained over 8.6 million. I think that's good news. HBO as a whole, HBO and HBO Max is now up to 38 million subscribers, ahead of their goal. Their internal goals, they never announced this, but the reporting is that internally they were shooting for 36. They're at 38. That's good. You've got some goals, and it's not like they were way off on their predictions, but they're moving the right direction. So definitely good news to see that. Now, if we could just get them to get their platform, HBO Max, on all the other streaming services and streaming boxes that are available so they could grow even further, that would be a good thing.
And global. That's the other bit. Yes. International, because there's still far too many international markets that don't have it. And it's one of the things that, I've mentioned before about how they have different challenges than a Disney Plus or Amazon or any of these others, because of the broadcast wing of it, which can also, I know that's been confounding you with these numbers.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan that I think it's misleading the way they report them. And so you have to backtrack from the news. So it's like they activated 8.6 million. They activated 4 point something. I don't remember what the point was in the previous quarter. So we can roughly say that HBO Max probably has in the neighborhood of 12 to 13, 14 million subscribers, which is not a lot. But I do think it's a little misleading the way they do that. Plus, they say activations, but I never saw if that was net activations as an account for anyone who lost. But as a whole, the way they're reporting it, and I talked about Apple does the same thing where they'll just tell you, we made this much money from iPhone. We won't tell you we sold this many of the iPhone 12s and this many of the iPhone 11s. They don't break it out that way. And I've always wished Apple would do that too because, again, I find it a little misleading. But there's rules on what has to be reported on these shareholder meetings, and there's rules of what don't have to be reported. They're not required to split that out, so they don't. And you don't really want to split it out more. If HBO Max alone had double or triple the number, or the day that it has more than what HBO proper does, I think we will hear about it, but that will be them trumpeting a success. So, we'll get there. But overall, they're still ahead of their internal projections. It's moving the right direction.
It is, and to further confound those numbers, there's also the number that came up in these articles about the number of people that haven't activated it yet but have an opportunity to, all of it. And again, that's a challenge almost kind of specific to
That's
HBO.
A marketing challenge. It's a marketing challenge.
It's definitely a marketing challenge, and it's one that it's almost singularly unique to them because of what they were doing before HBO Max existed. And that's why it's so difficult. You're right. We're at a point now where we don't have third-party anyone reporting these numbers and all these services. So everybody, whether it's Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon, HBO Max, they're all self-reporting.
Right.
All of them are self-reporting, and they're all, maneuvering numbers and data the way that they're going to report it. And you're absolutely right. The day that HBO Max gets more numbers than HBO does, they'll trumpet that. Absolutely.
I hope they do. I hope they do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
But
obviously the future, so.
It is. Well, present and future. But yeah,
Exactly.
the big thing here is that it is moving in the right direction, that they do consider it successful. They just got to get that reach up. They got to get on the other devices. They got to get global. I would say international is probably even more important. I still see so many of our listeners that don't live in the United States that talk about, well, we don't have
You're right.
HBO Max. We can't see this. We're not worried about the witches. We're not worried about.
You're right.
this
International
and that,
is more
so.
important than them getting on Roku or getting on the PS5, which apparently they're on the PS4. So hopefully that's just formalities that they need to go through. But they will gain more by going international than they would by going Roku. But both needs to happen. If you want to, like even Apple, like the most like buttoned up platform lock-in company that I know of, has Apple TV available on Amazon, has Apple TV available on Roku, available on televisions.
It's going to be on the PS5.
It's going to be on the PS5.
Yeah.
It's going to be on the PS4 soon as well. That's if you want a streaming service, you need to have your. We joke about like if Netflix could put their service on your refrigerator, they would, because they know the more screens that they have access to, the more likely you are to subscribe, the more likely you are to engage with that content, and then promote that content by word of mouth. HBO Max needs to get on that ball.
So to that end, Brent, it occurs to me looking at our rundown, perhaps we should shift things. I'll bring this up real quick.
Okay.
We should perhaps we jinxed it. Perhaps we, spoke this into existence last week when we made a comment about it. But we'll play some taps and have pour one out for Quibi. Because we made that comment last week about how
they're still around.
Right, they're still around despite all of its challenges, despite everything that, the struggles that it was having. And of course, now what do we get? We get news that, it will be ending its services. It will be ending its services in December. Quibi, we barely knew you. I did watch that one, was it The Most Dangerous Game? That was really good. It was really good. I enjoyed that. But I really didn't watch a whole lot of it after that. I sad to see you go. Wish it could have worked out better, but, it is what it is. So we're sorry if we jinxed you. But
I will tell you, like, I honestly don't really care about this, but I was going to subscribe and watch that Code 8 show that they were going to do. That the Amels did the Code 8 movie. I really enjoyed that. I wanted to see more from that world. They were going to do it on Quibi, and I missed it, and I'm probably now, I wouldn't be at all surprised if that never happens. So that definitely stinks. I have not seen any comments from the Amels on that specifically. On or about December 1st is the date that they are expecting to shut down. And then I did see a report that you can still sign up for. I've not verified this myself, but you can still go into the app, sign up for it. And it doesn't tell you, hey, we're only going to be around for another few weeks. So keep that in mind when you subscribe. That's questionable, man. I don't like that. But hopefully they'll offer refunds to people. I don't know. They tried. It failed. It is what it is. If they had succeeded, we would have been, trumpeting that from a different perspective. And you can't blame them for trying. You can maybe blame them that ultimately the idea was doomed to fail from the start, but maybe not. It's hard to say at this point. All we know is
the pandemic didn't help them either, considering the format.
I once subscribed to that theory, and now I really don't, because it was short form content that people watch on their phones. They were trying to make a premium YouTube when premium YouTube already exists, and
that's a good point.
As soon as I heard that said, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, they were doomed from the start. And no, the pandemic didn't hurt, because part of Quibi's idea was like, oh, you're standing in line or whatever. So like some of their like examples that they gave, like if you're at the grocery store and you're just waiting on 3 people with baskets full in front of you, you could watch a couple minutes. No, we don't have that kind of thing right now. But the other side of that is people do have, especially when Quibi launched, more time as more and more of the country was shut down at the time, people had the time to watch it. And so they didn't. Quibi, you gave it a shot. You'll get credit for that.
Yeah, it is what it is. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Like, I mean, they're gonna sell it obviously, or do whatever. But I don't know.
I bet they sell some of the content.
Yeah, well, yeah, yes, I think they will, because quite honestly, the way that they structured it, at least if it was like the most dangerous game, then they could probably like structure it as like features, and it'll end up on like Tubi or something.
Yeah.
But no, Quibi, I think, is the first high-profile casualty that we have really of the streaming wars.
Well, speaking of streaming, let's talk about James Bond. I saw a report the other day from a website I'd never heard of, and I sent it to you and said, "Have you ever heard of these guys?" Because they're saying that MGM is talking about, farming out James Bond to streaming. And then you hadn't heard of them really. I hadn't heard of them. I'm like, all right, disregard until I hear from someone else. Later that day, I see it pop up on my Apple blogs. And the Apple specifically, and as I told a coworker, to me, this gives a little bit more validity to it because I'm now hearing it from multiple different places, from different sites. And the Apple site that reported it, I very much am aware of, and I very much trust what they had to say. And so now I'm like, okay, there's a little something to this. Then yesterday I saw it from Variety. I'm like, all right, now there's something here. Now, MGM has denied that this ever happened. They deny this. And the trades do not always get it 100% right. But they have a track record enough that I believe that these conversations were happening. I believe that MGM at least, tentatively brought up the subject of selling to a streamer. Allegedly, even like Netflix and Apple have balked at the idea because of the $600 million price tag that they want to put on for this movie. And I will tell you right now, from their perspective, I get it. That's a hard sell. From MGM's perspective, if they could get a buyer close to that rate, that would be an absolute brilliant move. Absolute brilliant move. I totally, like, if they were offered $600 million, maybe it includes some of the other Bond stuff with it. I don't know. As a way to, like, give you some back catalog too. Watch the other Daniel Craig Bond movies leading up to this. Man, I know people that started, you told me it started the whole, oh my gosh, the death of theaters thing that's going on right now. But it's like, can you argue with $600 million? And just to be clear, and I'll explain in a minute, but I want to get your reaction, but $600 million this way is not equivalent to $600 million at the box office. Those are not the same number. But Ray, what were you thinking about? I'm sure you're in favor of it overall because, hey, you want to see the movie, but what were your reactions to this?
You will never sell me that they were not talking about this at some point. Absolutely. And not only that, they're not the only ones thinking about this. All these other studios are mulling their options. We've talked about this before, weighing your options out, exactly how you're going to play this going forward. There is no denying that the pandemic has decimated the industry in many ways, and they're all dealing with the aftermath of exactly how they're going to hedge their bets and try to stop hemorrhaging all the money that they've lost. They've lost millions, maybe even billions in certain respects, with respect to, when you talk about the potential the potential of a Black Widow box office, the potential of a Wonder Woman 1984 box office, a Tenet box office, all that potential revenue lost this year as a result of this. In MGM's case, Bond could have made them $1 billion already at the theater. And now, pushing it back, pushing back Bond was a strong enough move that Cinemark said, or Cineworld was like, we're done for the year, right? So you got to understand, from a business standpoint, MGM is looking to hedge its bet. They claim that it's not on, that they were never talking about this. I don't believe you. I don't believe you at all. You most certainly were talking about this. I understand why Netflix would balk, because $600 million is a little steep for them, especially, all the money that they've spent in the last 5 or 6 years to get as far ahead of everybody else in catalog. I get that. Apple could do this in the blink of an eye. I understand why they wouldn't just yet, because of everything else that they have their hand in, but they already bought Greyhound earlier this year from Sony, and we're seeing a precedent now where, they bought Greyhound, Netflix bought Enola Holmes,
right?
Amazon just bought Coming to America, the sequel, so this is going to happen more. Now, here's the thing about Bond. Bond is a big fish. Bond is on the level of, like when we talk about, that first big one, when we've speculated,
Right.
Who's going to do it first. Bond is on that level. If this were to happen, that would be our nuclear option, essentially, our game over. Like this, that would change everything. And I read an article that speculated, and I don't know if it was the one that you had sent me or not, but speculated that Apple, if they were to do it, which they could, Apple is a $1 trillion company, they most certainly could do this, that they should buy the franchise, because they're still looking for content for a library.
Right.
They still need a library beyond their original content. So, yeah, you'll never sell me that there weren't talks about this. Do I want to see it happen? Well, yeah, I mean, if Apple did this, and that's my biggest proponent that I think could do this. I mean, the other whales in this, like Google or Amazon, they could do it as well. I don't know that they would. Apple is your chief possibility if this were to go to streaming like that. Apple could absolutely do this, and if they did, yes, I would be in favor of it. I would like to see No Time to Die, because we don't know what the theatrical landscape is going to look like. We still don't know. But I understand MGM's hesitation to admit it, especially given, what Cineworld and like the British distributors, how they're reacting to it. They don't want to burn it. Clearly, MGM doesn't want to burn that bridge yet. It's almost like AMC and Universal, that whole thing. They don't want to burn that bridge yet.
Right.
So that's why they're denying it. But no, they're thinking about it. Of course they're thinking. They're all thinking about
MGM,
it. Every last one of them.
It would be foolish for them to say, we're looking into it to the exhibitors, versus saying it's a done deal, it's happening. Like, once they have that guaranteed page, because if they just say we're looking into it and it falls through on the streaming side, well, now they've pissed off the exhibitors too. And I don't think the exhibitors would not show the Bond movie, but because you're right. I mean, James Bond is one of the most iconic characters in like fictional history, regardless of the medium. And so to me, it makes so much sense. I wanted to look at some of the numbers, and I was thinking about some of these numbers. Bond has a budget of around $250 million. You rule of three that pre-COVID, it means they're looking for around 750. But let's be honest, especially after the performance of the last Bond movie, the last few Bond movies, they're not giving a $250 million budget hoping to get 750 in return. They want $1 billion movie. They want $1 billion movie. Well, you got to remember, when these movies come out, they get, I don't know the exact percentages, but I know the best cut for the studio is in the US, where the studio keeps somewhere in the neighborhood of like 50 to 60% of your ticket sales. But in other countries, it's far less. Like China, I've heard mixed reporting on, but it could be as low as 20%. I think usually I hear closer to 30, but I have seen those 20% numbers thrown out before. Maybe it depends on the studio, maybe it depends on the movie. My point is, $1 billion worldwide, I think they'd have to hit $1 billion worldwide to justify not doing a $600 million deal with streaming if they can get it. Because on streaming, if they sell to Apple, well, now Apple's the one paying for most of the marketing from this point forward. Obviously, they've paid for some of it in the past. Apple's going to be paying for it from this point forward. It'll be up to Apple to do it. And you know what? They easily could do this. Apple could easily mention that they're going to do this. In fact, they've done streaming events before. It would not at all surprise me to see them blast this from the rooftops that they're going to have it. The advertising would be all over, and that's a massive, massive user base who would have availability to see it. But that $600 million, that just goes back to MGM. It's not like they have to split half of that with the movie studio at that point, And so $1 billion box out, like people are like, oh, Spider-Man made $1 billion. It did, but that doesn't mean like Sony put $1 billion in their pocket.
Right,
Endgame makes over $2 billion, but Disney did not put over $2 billion in their pocket. They still have all the expenses. They have the revenue shares, not to mention any back-end percentages they have to give out to actors for those deals that all come in after the fact, after the money comes in. From MGM's perspective, if they could do this at $600 million, that would be a massive, massive win. And in fact, it would be so good that I would argue it would be negligent not to do this. It would be absolutely horrible not to do this, because there's no way you can bank on $1 billion movie right now in the current climate, especially without the largest movie market in the world of the U.S. And it sucks that, again, the U.S. is screwing over the rest of the world when it comes to movies. That sucks. I hear the complaints there. But you can't just put them, like a deal like this, you can't just put it in Apple TV Plus in America, but let it come out in other countries, right? Especially the UK, which obviously loves James Bond. Because you lose what makes that $600 million worth $600 million by losing the exclusivity worldwide. Okay? We're not talking about HBO Max here, who basically only has one country. We're talking Apple, who is worldwide, Netflix, who is worldwide. And they don't want people choosing to go see it in a theater instead of choosing to see it on Netflix or an Apple TV Plus. So it doesn't make any sense. Even if you did the number would have to be so much smaller for Apple to do that. It probably would not make sense to even bother with it anymore. And you look at like how movies like Tenet performed, and nobody expected Tenet to perform at the same level of the next Bond movie, but that does still tell you, even overseas, the market is not entirely back yet. If they do this, it makes sense. At some point, there's a line where they cross. Is it 400 million? I don't know. 500 million? I don't know. But at some point, 600, I think, is definitely past the point of, if you can get a buyer, you're flat out stupid not to sell this at that price.
All the theater people don't like you right now.
Whatever. That's fine.
But
look, there goes my follower count down.
But I mean, you make a lot of sense, though. You make a whole lot of sense, especially when we talk about the pure profit angle. And we've had that discussion for years with respect to box office numbers and people talking about, the marketing budgets and breaking even and all these numbers being reported. And it's like, okay, at the end of the day, I still feel like a lot of the people, that look at this and go, well, why can't they make this work? Why can't they do simultaneous release? You guys are still looking at this from a fan perspective. Mm-hmm. You're not looking at this from the business perspective. And we will reiterate, the studios, the theaters need the studios more than the studios need the theaters. They just do. I understand that a lot of them are hesitant to burn the bridges with the exhibitors. But they've almost all got plan Bs now. Almost all of them have some other form. Even if they don't have an app, VOD is an option. And that VOD is more of a direct pure profit option than splitting stuff with exhibitors and all other companies the theatrical way. So, it's just not, at the end of the day, you got to look at what makes the most business sense. Business is business. This is still a business. Would we love everything to work perfectly? Yes. We don't live in a perfect world. That's the long and short of it. And at the end of the day, Brent, I think you and I both agree, we just want to see No Time to Die.
Yeah, especially me. I went through and watched all the other Craig movies so I could go see this with A-list in theaters. And then it got delayed, and I'm like, I'm ready for it now.
You did homework. I did homework for it. So,
and I enjoyed those movies. I'm ready to see it. And if it does come to streaming, I will happily watch it. If I have to wait for theaters, so be it. I get it. But
safe theaters.
I hope it happens. I do hope that this comes to streaming. I basically want all the movies from 2020 and maybe 2021, because as I told you before we started, I'm not convinced of any movie with a 2021 release date either. I just kind of want them all to come to streaming, and I'm sorry. And yes, I know, I understand that people hate me right now, but to me, it's more important that I get to see the movie than where I get to see the movie.
I completely agree. Story first. That is for sure.
Right.
So, on that note, Brent, okay, so a couple of other quick things here at the end that I feel like more of these are for you. So I'll go ahead and rattle these off here first. Okay. I'm not necessarily going to play taps for this.
No, I wouldn't.
But Mark Guggenheim has confirmed that he has left the DCCW. Yes, I'm still calling it the DCCW. Despite the other term that is so more commonly used for it.
Yeah.
But, with the end of Arrow and finishing off Crisis on Infinite Earths, he says, I basically decided that a chapter's been closed here, and it seemed like I've said all I'm going to say, at least for now, with these characters in this medium. He is still involved, obviously, with the Green Lantern show and HBO Max, so he's not going too far away, but he is stepping aside from the Arrowverse for the time being. Brent, our resident DCCW expert, your thoughts on the end of the Guggenheim era in the DCCW?
I mean, I'm not surprised. He's not the showrunner of any of the shows at this point. He was basically showrunning Crisis. Like, that's what he's been working on. I think he did it for Elseworlds too, but I would have to verify that. Like, he was basically their crossover guy for the last couple of years. And yeah, he did direct an episode of Legends and stuff too, and I enjoyed that episode. But he's pretty much had one foot out the door anyway, and now his baby, the one that he started, the show that he worked on that started this whole glorious universe, is done anyway. And so all I can do is thank him for his services, for the hundreds and hundreds of hours of entertainment that he has personally contributed to like my life. And so it's a loss. It's a loss for the DCCW, but at the same time, I'm like, he's just going to Green Lantern. You know, he's doing other projects too, but it's not like DC television as a whole is losing him. He's still working up with Berlanti. He's going to Green Lantern. If you asked me, do you want him to go to Green Lantern, or would you want him to stay with Flash and Supergirl and Battle? I would say go to Green Lantern at this point. The shows he was the biggest part of are either done or ending, right? They're either done or they're getting close to wrapping up. And so it's like, yes, go to Green Lantern. Give me some more of that, Green Lantern Owen goodness, and it's fine. And I know he's got his history with the property to begin with, but again, just to remind everybody, that movie went through about 37,000 rewrites that he wasn't a part of after his time on it, and I still can watch that movie and enjoy it, so I don't care. Berlanti Guggenheim's name on Green Lantern, I'm still happy. I'm thankful for his time on Arrow and everything else, and now I look forward to seeing what he does with Green Lantern.
I like that phrase, Owen goodness. I like that. I do like that. And of course, for you, it's got to be a great transition, because I know that you and our good buddy Travis, you both have been in different places
Sure.
with the DCCW since Arrow ending and Crisis ending. But for you, it's a better transition for you because he's moving to your favorite DC property.
Right. My favorite DC franchise. It's like...
Right. On HBO Max, with HBO Max budget.
Yes, and he, in this same thing, he talked about basically, we're not making an 8-hour movie. We're making a television show. We're just doing it with movie money. And so I'm like, yes, this sounds amazing. Sign me up. I'm already signed up, but I would sign up if I wasn't. So no, I'm happy. I really am. I'm happy that he gets to do this. And do I really think he will never have any involvement in the DCCW again? No, I don't. I think something will get run by him. Hey, we have this question. Maybe we won't hear about it, but could you give us a few notes on this situation we're trying to work out? Or in the future, when they're trying another big crossover, even if it's not Crisis level, they may bring him in for some expertise to kind of help out whoever's in charge of it. So, Mark Guggenheim, I just say thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. All right, so... keeping with the DC TV theme for a second here. All right, so this episode is out on a Monday. Presumably, we would have already seen whatever on earth they're teasing with respect to Titans, because we got a brief clip. Like 5 seconds. It was just the Titans logo that flashed Red Hood, and it was dated for Monday, October 26th. Right. So, obviously, this episode isn't going to cover it, but whatever happened... we're going to talk about it in the next episode for sure.
Right.
So I guess not a whole lot to ask other than, are you worried?
I mean, I'm not. We knew the Red Hood was coming from fandom. Though it's really funny if you look at the comments on that Twitter post, Twitter did not know the Red Hood was coming.
I don't know how.
But
okay.
Fandom knew. And so... I'm not worried. I'm excited to see footage. I'm excited for it. I have said, I've gone on record multiple times that for whatever reason, the Titans cannot stick a finale episode to save their lives, or at least at this point, they're over 2. Season 1's finale sucked. Season 2 finale sucked. I said it. I don't care. I'm sorry if you liked them. They sucked. But the seasons were good. The production values, the acting, the costume design, all good, all enjoyable stuff. I like that stuff. We just can't stick the finale. Well, you know what? We have a whole nother season. I'll take it. And yes, they get another try from me to try and stick the finale. Hopefully, third time will be the charm.
I was gonna say it's only 2 strikes. They still.
That's right. They're not out yet. They're not out yet.
It's an 0-2 count. They still have a pitch left. So yeah, it is a really weird place where it's like, I love your seasons. I hate your endings.
Yeah. And I know for some people that would be a deal breaker, but. And maybe for a non-DC show, for me, that would be a deal breaker. But, I mean, that live-action Nightwing suit, I need more of that. Superboy, I need more of that. Hawk and Dove, they made Hawk and Dove, like, good, interesting characters. And I've always thought they were boring and lame in the comics. No, I want more of this. It's just, I want them to finish a little stronger.
I just saw some people, some mutuals of ours that they're really worried about Red Hood. They're mostly worried about how he will be treated because they have subjective issues. Of course, it's all subjective with how Titans has done characters going for it. And we'll have more to talk about on this after we see whatever the tease is, because we really don't know what it is, like, as far as what is happening on this date. But yeah, just, it's a different flavor. We'll see how it goes. I'm with you though. I've enjoyed the seasons and just haven't, because season 1's finale wasn't a finale.
Nope.
At all. And I'm, on the one hand, I'm tired of people. On one hand, I'm tired of people posting leaked images and video from the scrapped season 1 endings because it looks really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, it does irritate me because it looks really awesome. It's like,
it was their call. They weren't forced to. It was a creative choice.
It was.
I just think it was a crappy one. So,
right.
Hey, credit to them for their creative choices, even if I think it bombed horribly.
Exactly. So we'll just have to wait and see. All right, but here's a choice that you most certainly made based on another set of decisions. Marvel Unlimited. Now only a 3-month delay.
Yes, already enacted.
6 months.
Already enacted.
Already enacted.
I see this report come out, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. When does it start? Holy crap, it started today. It's like, today. Like, it is, at this point, by the time you're hearing this episode, it's a week old. And I have been, on the edge. Like, Brock and I have talked several times, just on the edge of going pure streaming, which is what this service is. It's a streaming service for comics with my comics. And DC Universe really, pushed me right up to it by going from 12 to 6 months starting in January, right? And this has to be a reaction to that, right? If it's not, pure coincidence, I don't believe it. I don't care. Marvel going from 6 to 3 months, and they've already enacted it. Fantastic. But you know what I did for... I stopped my subscription. I had a subscription through Comixology to Amazing Spider-Man, and I stopped it the other day. Not because I'm not enjoying the book, not because I was going to let the current story arc finish before I made that change, but I looked at the checklist at the end of it, and this is one of those story arcs where it's really part 1 and part 2, but they kind of advertise it as 2 separate things, but it's one big thing. Well, the part 2 of it just started, and there's 9, 10 more issues, and I'm like, man, you're getting close to $40 there. That's more than half of an annual subscription. So I just said, you know what? It's only 3 months. I have a ton of Marvel Unlimited that I've been adding every single week that I need to dive into. I'm at a good stopping point on this story. I'm going to hit pause, and in 3 months, I'll pick it back up. And so I stopped Amazing Spider-Man. I'm not dropping the book. I'm still going to read it. I'm just going to be 3 months behind. When Miles Morales Spider-Man finishes its current story arc, same thing's going to happen, but I think it's only got a couple more. When the Venom finishes its first, at 6 months behind, I was going to keep buying it monthly. At 3 months behind, I can't justify it anymore. And so so that's all, my current Marvel stuff that I've been reading the last few months is basically those 3 books. Everything else I've been waiting to hit Unlimited anyway at the 6 month point. DC... The 2 I'm really still currently up to date on is basically, or the 3 I guess, is Superman books, Young Justice, and Green Lantern Far Sector. Well, Young Justice only has 1 or 2 more issues. Far Sector only has 3 or 4 more, I think. And the Superman books, they're kind of at a midpoint, and they haven't been as strong as they were, in my opinion. I'm doing it. I'm pulling the cord. Within 6 months, I will not be buying anything weekly or monthly, and it'll probably be more 3 or 4 months when at that point. And Amazing Spider-Man was the first one to go, just because of the way the story shook out.
I do have to wonder how many others are in the same position as you and are making the same decision as a result of this. And you do kind of, it totally feels like a reactionary move to what DC.
How could it not be? And what a good move. What a great move. We've already got this infrastructure in place. We've been doing 6 months for years. We can flip that switch on a moment's notice. No big deal. It's not nearly as of an issue for them because they're set in stone on how their process. Do I hope that DC decides to just match them? Of course I do. But even if they don't, knowing that I'm now looking at 6 and 3 months versus 12 and 6 months like it was just a couple months ago, it's just financially I can't justify it. And I care about reading the stories, not collecting the stories. I can't justify it because I will still get to read everything.
Right, and that's that's another thing to look at. This is it's kind of another like a shift in the industry, if you will, where the idea of streaming comics, and what I think is interesting is they're doing this because like DC Universe Infinite is going to have 6 months, but then there's also the digital exclusives, and I don't know if Marvel Unlimited does anything like that.
Not that I've seen. I mean, they often get the digital first books or whatever. That Marvel doesn't do very many of them. They'll show up on Marvel Unlimited, but I think it's the same 6 months behind now, 3 months behind schedule.
It really feels like they're really starting to build and think more of the ecosystem of streaming comics
Yes.
in general. Like that's starting to become a bigger thing, and it certainly benefits somebody like me who has a crap load to read that you've all read already, but can't necessarily afford to buy the issues, and there's only so much that Scott can send me.
Sure.
So,
sure.
It's certainly something that I look at this and go, well, all right, okay, and I am not to Marvel yet. No, I'm not there. I'm not there yet. I still have the list you gave me like 3 years ago, but I'm not to Marvel yet. There's
That's
so
okay.
much DC I
That's
gotta
okay.
get through.
When
But-
you decide the time is there, get Marvel Unlimited.
Exactly. That's probably exactly what I'm going to do when I do eventually get to that point.
Now, at this point, the only thing I would say is with DC, I can add a title to a list. And as a new issue comes out, it's just in that list. Please, Marvel, steal. Don't borrow, steal this functionality. I want you to have that so bad because the library organization would be, at this point, my biggest complaint about Marvel. Steal this idea. And oh gosh, it'd be so, because then I could just say, I want my Amazing Spider-Man every time and just add it to my list. Currently, every Monday when new issues come out, I just look and see what the new stuff is added, add the list, gonna skip this, add the list, and it just keeps growing every week. I would like to be able to subscribe to things the way you can in DC Universe. So, Marvel, you made a great move, but now you need to make another one.
It's like operational. It's like when a new streaming app comes out, you're like, steal Netflix's structure.
Yes.
Basically, that's what you want, right? Because Netflix, the way they're doing it, more often than not, is kind of a baseline. Like that's what Disney Plus did. Disney Plus stole it.
Yes.
Disney Plus took Netflix's structure and made it their own in so many ways.
And thank God they didn't steal Hulu. That would have been, them, because Hulu's is better now. But at the time Disney Plus came out, Hulu was a horrendous interface. No, they went with the good one. That's what,
right.
That's what I want Marvel to do. Go with the good one in this perspective.
There you go.
All right. Well, we'd love to have any feedback you guys might have. You can email us at borderlessfans@gmail.com.
And we're also on Twitter. I'm at the Flightcast.
I'm at Brent Prime. The show is at Borderless Fans.
And you can find us and the other shows in our network at squadcastmedia.com.
See you later.
Take care, guys. Stay safe out there.